everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and welcome to the recap of a Leave No Dye Behind live stream, where I went through my collection of stock solution bottles and used up as many as I can to create these 4 colorways on 4 different yarn bases. The 4 bases that I dyed are from left to right: KnitPicks Hawthorne, KnitPicks Swish Decay, Wool to Dye For's That Yak, and KnitPicks Capretta Superwash. And I will give the fiber content for each of these as I talk about the individual colorways. But this live stream was a lot of fun because, as I mentioned, I had a lot of stock solutions of acid dyes that ranged from over 2 years old to, say, maybe a month old. And I was able to empty a lot of these bottles, which means I have more space for stocks and leftovers from various projects under the sink where I store them. And so that is all really, really good. One part of the stream that was a lot of fun was that I let the chat pick which type of colorway I would do on which yarn base. So in our first batch, the chat decided I should do a warm colorway on the Hawthorne stock yarn and a cooler toned colorway on our Swish Decay. When we reset, chat voted for a warm colorway on our That Yak, which of all of these started off as a bare, sort of cool toned brown, warm toned gray, oatmeal-y color. And then to do cooler tones on the Capretta Superwash. As far as our warm tones go, these colorways feel a little bit similar, but that is really because I had a lot of brown that I was adding here and not here. Part of me wished that I had used the Capretta for the warm colorway because this was really more bright, but because the That Yak yarn is deeper in tone, it gave us a more muted color overall, which is still very fall and beautiful, just more similar to the Hawthorne that I'm going to show closer in a moment. On the Hawthorne fingering weight yarn, which is 80% superwash fine Highland wool, 20% polyamide, I used a big turkey baster to apply the dye in strips. I layered on a bunch of different orange and gold and yellows, and then I took the brown and layered that sporadically but a little more heavily over the top, giving an effect that felt like very much the tiger eye gemstone. It's very beautiful with small shifts of color, and I think it'll knit or crochet up really beautifully. In all of the cases from the yarn I dyed in that live stream, because of the randomness of the immersion techniques I was using, there will be differences from skein to skein, but I really love the feeling here, and it just exudes this warmth and it feels comfortable and safe. I don't know, that's the mood the color gives me. Swish Decay is 100% superwash merino wool. And for this yarn, I took a lot of blues and greens and applied the dye using scribbles, really. And I think there were 6 different colors that I layered here. My goal was to create something that was more blue and teal, that was feeling less green, but you can see that this is a pretty green yarn. I had some radioactive acid dye from Dharma that I really wanted to use up, and I think that this is really, really beautiful. I am really happy I used curved squiggles instead of using lines on this because it randomizes the placement of colors a little bit more and makes it a little easier to spread some of them out without adding dye. And I'm very excited with how it turned out. That Yak from Wool to Dye For is 70% superwash merino, 20% yak, and 10% nylon. And it's the yak that gives it that depth of color already. It actually looks a lot darker wet than it does when dry, which makes it hard to dye sometimes, because if you're going for a color that isn't super saturated, it can be hard to tell on the yak how much you've added already. And so it's sort of, sometimes I struggle a tiny bit more with it, but it is a stunning yarn base and I really enjoy dyeing it, and I think I'll really love knitting with it as well. For this yarn, I focused on some red, some oranges, and some yellows, really trying to make sure I preserved some of the yellow in the colorway. My original vision was something sunset, and this isn't really that sunset because it is deeper, it is more fall leaves, which I'm very happy with. This comes from picking a yarn base that works with the colorway that you want. You can dye this type of base with neons even. It's just things are going to be more muted and subdued because of that base color, which is perfectly fine. Finally, we have this Capretta Superwash colorway, which honestly is one of my favorites. Capretta Superwash is 80% fine superwash merino, 10% cashmere, and 10% nylon. It is a really, really stunning yarn base and is 20% off right now as part of the KnitPicks big sale. The big sale at KnitPicks and We Crochet comes in early November before Thanksgiving every year, where thousands of skeins of yarn are up to 60% off, and there's other coupon codes and fun stuff going on as well. So it's worth going and checking that out if you want to learn more about the capretta or the other yarn that I've used in this video. I will have links to all of them down in the video description. I think I went back to the turkey baster for this colorway and allowed for some spread, but this time went for some blues and greens and browns, and we got something that feels almost mystical. I layered the colors, but I took advantage of some of the spread that we were seeing and really like how the deeper and light patches here interplay with one another. Again, this whole live stream, my goal was to use up some of these colors that I had mixed for various projects. A lot of times I like to mix up color fresh and directly for a project I'm dyeing for. But sometimes if I'm going to dye a lot of yarn, I want to make sure I have more than enough dye ready to go. And that means I end up with leftovers that sometimes I use in other projects. But as the secondary containers, I store these dye bottles in underneath a sink to prevent any spills. As that space fills up, then I run out of space to add other dye stocks, but also it sort of limits the colors that I'm going to use, because as my collection fills up with a lot of different oranges and yellows, that's going to be a family I might pick to use for a video. And so having fewer colors there means that I am more likely to play with some more mixing and play with some other colors that I have in my collection. There is nothing wrong with having dye stocks in your collection, and they can last for a while. The one thing I have observed is that some dyes crash out of solution when they get a little older and have some particles that settle towards the bottom, which in the one example I'm thinking of that was off camera led to an inconsistent attempt to recreate a colorway because the dye stock got more concentrated, and so therefore I used too much dye. Now, a lot of times the colors are very consistent, but I tend to use older stocks to dye by feel versus trying to create colorways with exact recipes. And I think that with the exception of when I'm dyeing a lot of yarn, and so I want to make sure I have enough dye mixed ready to go at the beginning, otherwise I typically only try to have some primary colors on hand in dye stocks. Maybe also some black or a navy, and yeah, the primary CMK, RBY colors, because those are ones that I might use often for mixing, and so having them already on hand can mean I can start filming something pretty quickly and can be really handy. But also, I know a lot of dyers don't go out of their way to keep stocks around, and so whatever you prefer, I'm curious to hear what you think, so let me know down in the comments below. And while you're at it, please make sure you are subscribed. It's seriously the biggest way you can help support the content here on the ChemKnits Tutorials YouTube channel. If you'd like other ways to support the content, I do have an Etsy shop where all of this yarn will end up. In fact, it might already be there now. So you should go check out the shop, and I do still have some ChemKnits Hanukkah samplers available, and so that is a really fun mystery yarn set, and you should go check out the details for that as well. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and thank you so much for watching.